friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma. If you don't know me already, I make houseplanting content all over the internet, so if you want to follow along with my houseplant journey and learn something along the way, subscribe to my channel and watch some more of my videos. Today we're going to be talking about PON and semi-hydroponic mixes. PON specifically refers to Lechuza, which is a German company that makes this peat-free mineral substrate that provides the perfect ratio of water to air for your plants. But in the plant community, PON is kind of used as a blanket term for any sort of semi-hydroponic substrate that's not just leca. Kind of how you use Kleenex instead of tissue or Hoover instead of vacuum. Whether you're buying them from Lechuza specifically, you're making it yourself, you're getting it from other brands which make semi-hydro mixes as well. It's all PON. Kind of in the wider community, and so I think people are just using it as like semi-hydroponics, that sort of thing. So throughout this video I will probably be just using the word PON because it's way easier to say than semi-hydroponics every time. So I'm using PON as a blanket term, not just for Lechuza, even though I do use their stuff and I do like it. But it's mostly made up of like really tiny rocks that kind of look like gravel. Like if you didn't know any better, if you weren't part of the plant community and you weren't familiar with it, you'd be like, why do you have a bag of rocks? Well, it's actually a nice substrate. But it mostly comprises of a porous material that holds a good amount of water and then slowly releases it to your plants, letting your plants like kind of take up as much as they want through their roots, rather than soil where like the entire material is porous and will hold the water next to the roots. This semi-hydroponics gives the roots like air and water at the same time, so the roots are allowed to take up what they want rather than just being forced to take it up by the soil. So I started using PON just over a year ago, and I did so actually in an IGTV video that was sponsored by Lechuza. So if you want to know more information about specifically Lechuza, watch this IGTV and get some more information over there. I will link it down below in the description. But in the past year and a bit, I have probably converted about a quarter or a third of my plants to PON. I really like it. I think it's a great substrate and it makes my life a lot easier. Of course, there's pros and cons to anything, and I will get to those later in the video, but overall, I just want to say I am a fan. I like it and it has made my life easier, which is all I can ask for as a plant parent of like over 100 plants. Anything that makes my plant parent life easier is gonna be a good one. I've also used it on tons of different types of plants. I've got some philodendrons in it, monsteras, scindapsus, alocasias, marantas. Like I've tried it with so many different types of plants and I haven't had that many instances of it going wrong, which is great. So generally, almost all tropical plants tend to quite enjoy it. I've not tried it on anything like cacti or succulents. I don't know if they would like it as much, purely because it's like a water-based system and those don't like to drink water in the same way as tropical plants. So I'm not quite sure if that would work. So if you're more into cacti succulents, I don't know if this is the right substrate for you. But if you're into tropical plants like me, definitely suggest giving it a go, because it just works. Oh, it just works. Apparently you can just use it like soil and not have like a water reservoir or anything at the bottom. I personally haven't tried that because that terrifies me, because then I feel like I would need to water it so friggin' often and it wouldn't make my life any easier. So I use it specifically with self-watering pots or pots that I have made into like a sort of reservoir system. And I've gotten these pots from Lechuza themselves, from Amazon. I kind of DIY them. Like you can just use a normal nursery pot and fill the bottom of your decorative pot with water. That works too. Like you don't have to do anything special. As long as the like cash pot doesn't have drainage at the bottom, like it's not got a hole, it would be fine and then work as a reservoir. So you can kind of do it as low budget or as high budget as you want. The Lechuza pots are really good. I do quite like them, but they are on the more expensive side. Or you can get something cheap and cheerful like this from Amazon, or Elho make really good self-watering inserts as well. So I will link some of my favorites down below. There's like lots of really good options out there, so those are some of my favorites. Try them if you fancy. But both the like sort of DIY method and the specific self-watering pots work relatively the same way. I personally like having self-watering pots, especially ones where you have like either a little meter that goes up or down or a little window where you can see the water level in them. I find that it makes it much easier to go about my watering routine and see whether or not the plants need anything more. With this system, you can't really see unless you lift it up. So the way I tell quickly is if I lift out the cash pot, ooh, and I can hear the water dripping into it, then it's probably got enough water. So it just depends on the amount of ease you want. So there are so many pros when it comes to PON or semi-hydroponics. I personally think they outweigh the cons, but of course it's up to you and your collection to decide if that is the case. But here are some of my biggest pros. It makes owning a lot of plants so much easier because they do have a water reservoir. They don't dry out as quickly, so I find that I have to water them a lot less frequently than I would my plants in soil. And especially with the self-watering system where you can see the amount of water in there, you don't need to go around with a moisture meter or anything like that. You can just see if it needs a water top up or not. It makes it quite easy. It also means that you can go on holiday a little bit easier. I find a lot of my plants in semi-hydro don't need to be watered more than every 2 weeks or even longer, depending on the plant and the pot. And so I could just refill all of the reservoirs right before I go on holiday and not have to worry about those plants getting too thirsty while I'm gone, even for a trip that's like 2 weeks. Yeah, it just makes going on holiday a bit more of a stress-free time and allows you to not worry about it as much. I also find that it is a lot less messy, or that the cleanup is quite a bit easier. Of course, if you knock over a plant, it will still make a mess. They are little rocks. But I find when potting up, it is so much easier because the PON kind of just falls away from the roots a lot more than soil does. It can't get too compacted or anything like that. And so it makes for repotting to be like a fairly mess-free process. And because it's rocks, they don't make your hands dirty, which is good. They can like stick to your hands a little bit, but not nearly as much as if you were to use soil. Like they don't get under your fingernails or anything like that, which I don't know if you care about, but sometimes it's nice to like repot something and not have to like wash my entire body free of soil afterwards. I find that they are especially great for like moisture and humidity loving plants like alocasias and marantas. They really thrive in this environment because I am kind of a chronic underwaterer. I'd much rather underwater my plants than overwater them because it's easier to recover from that. And so I tend to underwater these plants a little bit. So having them in semi-hydro allows them to take up as much water as they want, instead of me having to worry about making sure that I'm watering them more frequently than I water the rest of my plants. Also, having the water reservoir at the bottom kind of slowly evaporates with time as well, creating extra humidity, which plants like this really freaking love, and especially tropical plants and ones in my IKEA cabinet, they absolutely love that extra boost of humidity. So all of the plants in there are benefiting from that, even if they're not in PON. So I think it does really help, and I think it helps keep my humidity in the IKEA cabinet super high. I think it's like in the 80s most of the time, which is pretty surreal, but I think it's just because I've got a lot of plants in PON in there. It also provides a less hospitable environment for fungus gnats and pests like that like to breed in the soil of your plants. So, I mean, I still do have fungus gnats because that's just something that happens when you have a lot of plants, especially ones in soil. But if you converted all of your plants to semi-hydro, I can imagine that fungus gnats could go away completely, which would be freaking awesome. You still can get things like thrips and spider mites, but again, I think they're less common because they can't breed in your soil and it's a bit more of a humid environment for your plants. If you're using Lechuza PON or putting your own slow release fertilizer in your own semi-hydro sort of mixture, it makes it so much easier than something like Leca where you have to like add nutrients to the water. Also, it's pH balanced, so you don't have to worry about adjusting the pH of your water or anything like that. That was one of the things that deterred me from Leca. I just found that to be so overwhelming, and I like that I don't have to think about that with this. It's just such a minimal process in comparison. Like, pH balancing, man, I don't need to do that. Like, that's just, I'm not a scientist. I know I did a video on pH balance of soil, but like, I don't know. It's just so complicated, like so unnecessarily complicated, that I find this so much easier because I don't have to worry about it at all. And I love that. Really, this is just like a worry-free sort of setup, which is my goal, really. I feel like I'm such a lazy plant parent. Anything I can do to make my life like worry-free and easy, give it to me. Sign me up. Take my money. You can have all of my money. Just make it worry-free and easy. Another pro is that going from water propagation to PON is so freaking easy. Like, so easy. It is the simplest thing ever. Moss propagation to PON is also fairly easy. I find it a little bit more difficult because the roots are slightly different, but it's still a fairly easy process. And once you have your plants in PON, the root growth is crazy. It just grows so fast. Honestly, faster than soil. I find that it just creates the perfect environment for roots, and they just absolutely go crazy, which who doesn't want that? Also, it is more environmentally friendly because it is super easy to reuse. You can just boil it and then reuse it again. You don't even have to. If your plants are pest-free and not rotted, you probably don't even have to boil it. I mean, you probably should, but you don't have to. I definitely have reused some PON without boiling it, and I have reused some PON with boiling it, and it's so easy. So like, once you have a good amount, you can just reuse it forever, basically, instead of having to get new soil. And I know you can like boil your soil or like bake it or something. It just doesn't feel right. I feel like it just doesn't work as well. So being able to boil and reuse this, it's great. It's just reusable. Who doesn't want reusable? It's not all good in the semi-hydroponics world. There are some cons as well to this substrate. One is that it can be quite heavy. You're literally just putting rocks around your plants. They're not light. And especially if you have a water reservoir, that's weight. So they're not super lightweight like they can be with leca or some soils. They do have a bit more weight to them than that. But personally, I don't see that as too big of a con. It's just something to be aware of. If you have like really fragile shelves or something, it might not be the best bet for you. Another con, which I find personally really annoying, is that you have to rinse it before use. Like, you get PON in like a big bag or whatever, and just through transit and being moved around, it'll like rub against each other and create lots of dust. So it's really good to flush it before use to just get that dust out of the PON. I personally do it in like massive batches because I hate it so much that I'm just like, one and done. I only want to do this once. So that's why I don't have a bag of Lechuza PON. I have this massive box, which is all pre-rinsed. So I only have to do it like the one time and then never worry about it again. But yeah, that is a little bit annoying, but once you've done it, it's done and you can just move on with your life. You should also probably flush your PON fortnightly, like once your plants are in it, just to remove any like fertilizer buildup or extra salts and minerals that could have accumulated in it. I personally don't do that, and I haven't really experienced any issues, but it is suggested. So if you want to be doing it right and perfectly, you should flush your PON. Maybe I will. Sometimes I do, but more often than not, I will forget and not even think about doing it. And so far, it's not been an issue, so we're fine. It can also be a stressful transition if you have a plant that you've had in soil for a while, or that you bought in soil and you want to transition it to PON. It can take a minute to acclimate and get used to it, and that can cause quite a lot of stress on the plant, causing it to lose leaves. You can experience root rot and stuff like that. Also, some plants like randomly just reject the PON, so it is good right after you've transitioned to keep a close eye on your plants and make sure that they are handling the transition okay and not dying. I have had a couple instances of plants not liking PON, specifically my Scindapsus officinalis. I think it was rooting in moss, and then I transferred it to PON because I've put all of my other Scindapsus in PON and they've like absolutely loved it. it just like lost all of its leaves and it has been a stump of a plant. But basically I decided to take it out of PON again and put it back into soil because it was growing fine in that before. So like I said, you just need to be aware of it. Since it's been back in soil, it's been not doing much for a really long time now, but I think it's finally starting to grow a little bit, so that's very good. But like I said, you just need to keep an eye on things and make sure that they're doing okay. For the most part, I've not had any issues, but it's good to just pay attention for like the first couple weeks after you've switched over to PON. But like I said earlier, going from water crop to PON, almost seamless. It's uncanny how easy that process is. It's great. So the two main types of PON that are on the market at the minute are Lechuza PON and Soil Ninja's Semi-Hydroponic substrate. I have tried both of them. The Soil Ninja stuff is quite new on the market, so I have had a lot more experience with Lechuza, but I do like both of them and I think they both work really well, and I am happy to keep using both. I did buy like a massive 18-liter bag of Lechuza before I had the Soil Ninja stuff, so I'm gonna keep using them. Maybe even mix them one day. Is that sacrilege? I'm sorry, Soil Ninja. You just gotta do it sometimes. I think they're fairly similar in price, both coming in at about £1.10 something per liter. Of course, it gets cheaper the more liters you buy. I think especially with Soil Ninja, you get quite a lot of marked down once you get into buying more at a time, which is awesome. Also, Soil Ninja is a smaller company and I know them and they're my friends. So this is not sponsored by them, but I really like supporting small businesses and my friends, so I will do that if I at all can. One of the biggest differences between the two is that Lechuza PON is a lot smaller. The rocks are much finer than Soil Ninja's is. It doesn't make that much of a difference in the end. Like, it doesn't affect how your plant lives in it at all. I don't think it really matters, but I have noticed that sometimes if you've not got self-watering pots and you're just doing the like sort of DIY reservoir method, Soil Ninja tends to work a little bit better because it's a little bit bigger and less will fall through the holes, like the drainage holes of your nursery pot, whereas Lechuza PON, it will fall through the holes, and so sometimes you need to get sort of a mesh or something like that to cover those holes and make sure it doesn't fall through. Also, with rinsing, I find that Lechuza takes a little bit longer to rinse clean, probably because it's traveling further and it's like processed in a big factory and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how Soil Ninja processes their semi-hydro, but it didn't need as much rinsing for me. It went a lot quicker than the Lechuza did in my experience, so saves me time and makes my life better. That's the entire premise of this video. It saves me time and makes my life better, so if Soil Ninja does that, we like the Soil Ninja. With the Lechuza PON, I have had a couple experiences with mold growing on the top of it, which I've only experienced in a couple of plants, and in theory it shouldn't really happen at all because like it's not organic matter in the substrate, so like not really sure why it would develop mold, but I have seen it happen. I mean, all you really have to do is scrape it off the top and boil it to solve the problem, but if we can avoid problems in the first place, that would be great. I haven't had that at all with Soil Ninja stuff, but I mean, I don't think it's like impossible. It's basically the same components, just in different sizes. So it's probably possible, just I haven't had it happen yet with Soil Ninja. One of the biggest differences between the two is that Lechuza PON comes with fertilizer already in it. So it's just got slow release fertilizer pellets, and those will slowly release fertilizer over time. I think it lasts about 6 months before you need to start fertilizing again in another way. Soil Ninja stuff automatically comes without any fertilizer because they found that because different plants need different fertilizer amounts, they'd rather you be able to put it in yourself. So they do sell little sachets of fertilizer, slow release pellets, that you can add to your PON as and when you want it. So it does have a little bit more versatility in that way, and you can kind of customize it a little bit more, which I think is useful. It's just whatever you fancy. I've personally not had any issues with over fertilizing any plants in Lechuza, but it's possible, I suppose, and so maybe the customizable put the fertilizer in yourself option might be better for you. Overall, I've found them to be pretty similar and work in very similar ways, so I wouldn't necessarily say that one is better than the other. It's just what you would prefer to use. I'm pretty sure Soil Ninja is currently, at this time, only available in the UK because they're a UK-based business, whereas Lechuza is at the very least available throughout all of Europe because it's a German company, and the UK, and I think you can get it in the States as well. It might be a little bit more expensive because of like importing, but it is a bit more widely available. So that is it. That is my experience with PON or semi-hydroponics. I overall really like semi-hydro, and I think that the pros definitely outweigh the cons for me. So I highly suggest you give it a try, especially if you've got a lot of plants and you want to make your life easier. Honestly, it makes my life so much easier. I cannot stress that enough. But I'll make sure to link everything I mentioned down below in the description, links to Soil Ninja and Lechuza PON, as well as my favorite self-watering pots and stuff like that. So head down there if you're interested in trying it for yourself. This isn't affiliated or sponsored with any of them, but I like sharing what I use because I feel like it's useful. So yeah, that is my experience. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did like the video, please leave a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future. Also, I'm really curious if you use PON, you'd put a little rock emoji in the comments down below. I'm doing a little poll. Who uses PON? If you don't use PON, let me know down below why you don't, because I am curious if there's more cons than I know about. And of course, subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!